He is on probably 2 podcasts a week now, and these are
Mm,
extraordinary podcasts that are so highly matched. The conversations are so authentic, and what it's done is it's started to build trust for them with their existing shareholders, because these conversations that these podcasters have with the CEO, because they know the content, they're interested in the content, they know their audience is interested in the content. So therefore, the conversations are really, really, like I said, they're authentic and they're in depth and they're interesting. So it's not just this, 5 or 6 canned questions about, investor relations and what investors might need to know.
yeah.
This is Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, your go-to guide to solving your biggest marketing agency challenges authentically. I'm your host, Mike Alton, and each episode is an honest and frank look at what agencies go through, from turning clients to tackling tech and ideas that you can apply to your own business. And now, the rest of today's episode.
Welcome back to Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, where each and every week we're going and talking to marketing agencies just like you who are going through many of the same struggles you're going through and sharing their stories. Subscribe to find in each episode the inspiration, the motivation, and the perspiration that go into growing and scaling agencies like yours. Now, agency owners, many of them, yourself perhaps included, are struggling to get their clients booked on the right podcasts. Traditional outreach methods are time consuming, inefficient, and often lead to rejection after rejection, hours wasted researching shows, crafting individual pitches, and following up only to see minimal results. Even worse, when agencies do land podcast appearances for their clients, they're often on shows that aren't truly aligned with their expertise or audience. The conversations feel forced, the content falls flat, and the ROI just isn't there. Meanwhile, clients are growing frustrated with the lack of meaningful exposure. The agency resources continue to be drained on an approach that's clearly broken. But what if AI could transform your podcast outreach strategy? What if you could match your clients with their perfect podcast partners in a fraction of the time while actually increasing your success rate? That's exactly what we're exploring today with our guest, Kara Wood. Kara is a digital marketing powerhouse who's founded and scaled 2 successful agencies. She's particularly known for innovative work in regulated industries like healthcare, where she's pioneered the use of AI to revolutionize how agencies approach podcast outreach and media partnerships. As someone who's spent over 2 decades at the forefront of digital marketing transformation, Kara brings a unique perspective on how agencies can leverage technology to create more authentic, profitable connections for their clients. Hey, Kara, welcome to the show.
Wow, that was a fantastic introduction. Thank you so much. And it's great to be on your show, Mike. Thank you.
My pleasure. I can always tell folks they did all the hard work to earn whatever I said during the introduction. I'm just sharing with the world. And, fortunately, you and I have known each other for many, many years. We won't say how many, but a long time. So I appreciate you coming on here and sharing what you've been working on lately. And before we dive into that AI solution, can you just paint a picture of what traditional paid media and outreach strategies typically look like for agencies and why they're becoming just so ineffective these days?
Mhm. I'd be happy to. So, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I started realizing that, these webinars, these interviews, these paid to play videos that, I saw a lot of my clients paying for, outside of my agency, because my agency, for a long time was just traditionally, we did the social media, we did the social media, we did the paid, we did the organic, and we just sort of stuck to the major platforms. So I would see my clients go out and pay for, these spots on, different television channels, et cetera, but they had paid for this spot and they paid a lot of money for this spot. And then they would be interviewed by somebody that was sort of interested in what they were doing, but not really. They didn't have any control over the editing. They didn't have any control over getting stills or, any kind of content afterwards was like an absolute no-go, but they were paying an astronomical amount of money for this.
Yeah.
And it was just really sad because I was watching it going, "It doesn't have to be like this, and I don't think this is right," but I didn't have a solution at the time, and I knew podcasts were percolating, I knew that they existed, but I actually, probably like a lot of listeners, I had no idea how many podcasts were actually out in the world. So, there is the problem. The problem is sitting right in front of me. I see that there's a lot of money being exchanged. I see that the products are terrible, right? The videos are terrible, the webinars are terrible, the questions are terrible. I can see, because a lot of the companies I work with are public companies, so they have shareholders that are involved in where money is spent, etc. Shareholders are blasting these videos and webinars on social media saying this is boring, this is dull, I've heard this before. So that sat with me for quite a while, and I thought there's got to be something better out there. And people's stories, I believe, can't be told in sort of bite-sized TikTok dances. I love the platform for certain things, but if you're a CEO of a public company and you need to tell a story about, you're having to close down one factory because you need to move it over here for various different reasons, a TikTok dance or an Instagram post is not going to work.
Hmm.
So that was where I was sitting, and I was getting a little sort of depressed, just seeing, like I said, all this money being spent on kind of lackluster content. So a PR agent friend of mine gave me a call a couple of months ago and said, I am playing with this new AI platform that pitches podcasts, and it is amazing. And I instantly went, okay, tell me more. Like, how does this work? How did it come across your desk, etc. So she does a lot of work with agencies and people in New York, and this particular AI platform was developed and came out of sort of a group of like really cool people in New York. And so they developed a AI pitching for podcast platform. And I thought, well, it's a bit expensive, but I'll take it. I'll check it out. And so I did. And I have to tell you, using it in combination with ChatGPT, and then also, taking all of the work and various content and decks and research and stuff that that my clients provide for me, putting it all together, it has just it's been game changing, and it's been so exciting.
So walk us through that process, because you mentioned ChatGPT. Tell us what this podcast platform specifically is, and then walk us through your process now. How are you using AI and these different tools together?
Right, right, right. Okay, so first of all, this particular AI, right? It will analyze your client profiles. It will then take a look at, you will upload all the decks that, maybe your clients have for, investor relations or for their company. I mean, it could even be a catalog. So it takes your client's profile. It takes, all of the information that supports who your client is and what they do and what their company does, etc. And then from there, it works similar to ChatGPT, or sort of like a supercomputer. It analyzes all of that information, and then it will go and it will match your client with relevant podcasts that are highly aligned with their messaging. And it goes super granular. And then what it does is it automates your research, it automates the pitch creation, and then it will even take the most recent podcast that the host has done, and it will find a way to sort of tie in what your client has recently done or is interested in pitching or wants to talk about, and tie it all in, and then it emails them. Now, you have the opportunity to, go in and fine tune it and tweak it and make sure that it's great. But for the most part, it takes out all of the heavy lifting, because who has the time to listen to? I mean, I think there's 4.9 million podcasts out there. It's extraordinary. So it's virtually impossible, I think, to, you know, contact all of these podcast hosts and sometimes these very niche businesses or areas that might be interested in your host. So AI has just flipped everything on its head, and it's quite extraordinary, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So what's the platform called?
Okay, so the platform's called Podpitch.
Okay, so it's
All right.
podpitch.com. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and there are quite a few podcast matching platforms out there, and I've checked them all
Yes,
out because
there are.
I'm a junkie. Like, I am a platform junkie. Will go and check everything out before I decide on one. So I checked out Podmatch, I checked out anyways, anything that has a pod something connected to it, I checked it out. But Podpitch, they're still fine-tuning everything. I mean, I don't even think this company has been around for a year yet. Maybe they've just sort of, turned on a year. But it's changed my business, I
Hmm.
guess, is the best way to put it. Do you have any other questions about how it works? I made it super simple.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and just for the sake of, transparency,
Yeah.
you're not associated with Pod Pitch. You're not getting a kickback or anything like that for this
No.
experience. I just want listeners to understand this isn't a sales pitch for Pod Pitch, but Car and I have been in similar situations where we know the struggle is real. Now, I'm not representing clients and trying to get them booked. I'm representing myself and Agora Pulse and our CEO, and I'm either trying to get guests on my podcast or I'm trying to get him or myself on other people's podcasts. And that struggle is very real. It's either I pay an agency or one of these other services that you talked about a
Mm,
lot of money for very, very mediocre results. That's been our experience so far. We're either, getting, bookings on podcasts that really are not a good fit for us at all because they're not able to get us on any other ones. Or I might have a list of a
mhm.
thousand podcasts that I could reach out to myself, and that's daunting and time consuming and probably equally as ineffective. So I'm really interested in the kinds of results that you're
Mm.
seeing because you said it revolutionized your business on behalf of your clients. Share a little bit more about what that looks like.
Okay. So, for example, one of my clients is in the circular economy. It's a recycling company. I mean,
Mm,
that's not super exciting stuff, right? But what they're doing is, if you are in the circular economy world or if you're in the closed loop recycling conversation, what they're doing is really cool. So, I've probably worked with them for maybe 5 or 6 years, and we've struggled growing the email list. We've struggled
yeah.
getting them earned media because it seems so niche and just so complicated. It was really hard for us to try and find their community. So last ditch effort, when I found out about Podpitch, I, put our CEO's bio up. I put up, all of the information about what the company does, et cetera, et cetera. He is on probably 2 podcasts a week now, and these are
Mm,
extraordinary podcasts that are so highly matched. The conversations are so authentic, and what it's done is it started to build trust for them with their existing shareholders because these conversations that these podcasters have with the CEO, because they know the content, they're interested in the content, they know their audience is interested in the content. So therefore the conversations are really, really, like I said, they're authentic and they're in depth and they're interesting. So it's not just this, 5 or 6 canned questions about, investor relations and what investors might need to know,
yeah.
which we were typically paying a ton of money for. But now this is earned media for the most part because the podcasters, they see the pitch. It usually takes 2
Yeah.
or 3 emails before, the podcast host will respond to us or the producers, but Podpitch takes care of that. It creates sort of 3 emails that it will sort of send out if
Okay.
you don't get an email back, which is very cool. And each email is unique to the most recent podcast that they put out, and the AI will sort of keep tying in what your client or what yourself does into sort of their most recent conversation. And the AI has not missed a mark. I've had 4 or 5 clients use this with me, and we have not missed a mark. Every podcast has been just fabulous, and the podcast host has been just fabulous. There's no kind of missing. Everything has been
Hmm.
very sort of focused and impactful.
It's that AI element that I think is a true differentiator between their solution and what I've seen in the past. I mean, I've had a blog since 2011, so a long time, which means I get pitched every single day by people who want to write for me. And it's always
Okay.
the same templates, right? And they might reference my most recent article, but it's not an in-depth reference or anything like that. So I understand that technique and it
Yeah.
can work if it's done well. And so what I'm hearing you talk about is how the AI is not only referencing the most recent podcast and saying, "Yes, I listened to your most recent podcast and I think I'd be a great fit," which I could say about any episode or any topic, right?
Yeah.
It's connecting the dots a little bit more and saying your most recent podcast about XYZ was very much in line with what our CEO talks about. Or, obviously I haven't seen it, but I'm guessing there's
Yes.
that. But I think even more importantly, is the actual podcast show fit and how the
Mhm.
AI is looking at everything that I've ever talked about and everything that this podcast has ever talked about and connecting the dots there. Because the platforms that I've used to date, they're looking at like keywords. Like I might tag myself as interested in entrepreneurship. And so any other podcast that has tagged itself as about entrepreneurship, their algorithm says, "Oh, well then they're a fit." And that's too basic,
It
right?
is.
Because if they're talking about entrepreneurship for solopreneurs and I'm representing a SaaS company that really, if you're 10 employees or less, you're not going to need our product. That is not a fit. And I think that's the challenge the industry keeps
Yeah,
running
and
into.
it's a waste of time for you because
Yeah.
you have to sort of read through everything and kind of pick what might be somewhat, in line, and it's sort of a waste of time for them too because they're reaching out to, blogs or even, podcasters, and there really is sort of no alignment. And and this is why I really, really like AI because it's like having the smartest best friend, right?
Yeah.
You you have to come to the table with something. Listen, when you're using Podpitch or even AI, it's a supercomputer that you have to feed, right? I have to make sure that, you have your client's bio with everything in it that matters. And you need to make sure that, you feed the supercomputer or the Podpitch, the decks that are relevant, the data that matters, and the top five things that this person might want to speak about or kind of what their expertise is or what they might want to sell. Like you still have to kind of come at it from a marketing point of view and also maybe a shareholder point of view, like what shareholders might want to listen to or what, consumers might want to buy. So, once you get all of that information uploaded, the other cool thing with this, which I love, is you can create various different campaigns. So, if, for example, your client is an entrepreneur, but they're also, you can focus on entrepreneur podcasts and pitch for that. But also, if they also want to speak about recycling, that kind of in that area, you can then create campaigns that just focus on recycling and even get down to, just glass recycling. If that's all your client wants to talk about, you can create these really, really niche campaigns. And every time I think, oh, there's not going to be a podcast out there that's interested or, that's talking about that, there is. you know?
Right? Yeah, we talked about that because yeah, there's
Yeah.
4.5 to 5 million podcasts. Now they're not all active, but there are a lot out there. But I like your point because our CEO, Emeric Arnault, he's probably most well known for talking about starting a SaaS company because he's a founder of a well-known SaaS company out of Paris. So that's usually what he gets asked to speak on
Right.
podcasts, but he also wants to talk about social media. And if he's, feeling a little itch, he might want to talk about what is it? Kite surfing is his real hobby, so he might
Yes.
enjoy a kite surfing appearance. So I love that
Yes.
about that. Now
You
you talked about feeding the AI all the relevant information up front, which is great. That makes it personalized. But how do you maintain that authenticity and the personalization? I think a lot of folks listening might be wondering, okay, cool. I can have the AI automatically find me podcasts and even automatically pitch and repitch and repitch. How do I not sound like a robot and tick people off? How do you
yeah.
maintain that?
That's a really good question, and there is an answer for it. So when you're sort of working in pod pitch, you have the opportunity to say things like, do not use these words, do not use this language. And so that can help you sort of shape the email that you send out. Use this voice. You can pick voices too, by the way. So if your client has a specific way of writing, of speaking, etc., you can put that into the pitch for the AI. So not only do you upload, bios and content and research, etc., there's also the opportunity to shape out what the voice is. So you can sort of shape the voice out and pick that voice when you're pitching. You also have the opportunity the AI will present you, let's say, 50 podcasts, and you can quickly go through and go, this is a hit, hit, hit. This is an absolute miss. This is a hit. This is an absolute miss. So you can really start to shape the very specific podcast that you're interested in. You do have to sort of teach the AI a little bit. And then with regards to pitching and repitching and sort of repeating yourself, the AI takes care of that. So each time that the AI will email a podcast that is a fit, and you get a chance to approve it, it doesn't just sort of happen on auto unless you want it to. Each email is special and it's unique and it's different, and you only send 3 emails out. So if you don't get a response after sort of the third email, the platform stops sending emails
Mm,
to that podcast. And it seems to, obviously I don't work for them, so I don't know all of the nuances, but it seems to be able to understand, like, if you get a response back, the AI will stop pitching. So it knows to stop
nice.
if the podcaster has responded. And then it actually has this, like, wonderful platform that will move that podcast into responded, and then it will move the podcast into booked once you've booked
Mm,
the podcast. There's still a little bit of back and forth, like, you still have to kind of, when you respond, you have to respond from your own email. But when you're sort of checking out the podcasts and what's been sent and all that sort of stuff, you have to do that in the platform. But the wonderful thing about it is you can say, for example, you have 4 different clients, 4 different emails. You can use all of those different emails to send your pitches out from. So it's not just coming from, like, Kara@charlie.io. If I'm working with Regenix and I have an email with them, I can send from my email. So that's kind of a fun thing about the platform is it's not just sort of a one agency send it all
yeah.
out. You can look that you're at, maybe you're working internally for a client, maybe you're working agency side. Sometimes the lines get blurred for me anyways.
Completely makes sense. Folks, we're talking with Cara. What about the real struggle agencies and PR experts have building the business awareness and perception through podcast experiences and appearances and how she solved that? Before we continue, let me share with you another challenge facing agencies today, reporting and how that's easily solved.
I actually can't say enough great things about the reporting with Agora Pulse. I feel like that is my job security every month. My clients aren't that active on social media, which is why they have me manage their profiles for them. And when they get that report, it verifies that they're making a good investment.
The metrics downloads are so simple and easy to read, and it really helps me show where we are doing things right on social and where we need to improve.
So I think one of the main reasons why we decided to move to Agora Pulse is because it's a more comprehensive, integrated tool for all of our marketing needs. So rather than what we have had to do historically with Sprout, which is use certain parts of that platform that work really well and then supplement it with other outside tools, by moving to Agora Pulse, we were able to keep all of that into one technology platform, which is not only a time saver, but it also makes sure that our analytics and all of our reporting's on point because we're pulling all from the same source.
It's a really great platform for agencies. It makes it really easy to manage, but gives me really, really, really robust information that actually helps me develop better strategies for my clients and better plans of action.
So, one question I've been wondering is I know a lot of the agencies listening work in very regulated industries like finance or healthcare. How does this approach help them? They've got to navigate compliance and figure out how to still try to create engaging content. How does this help them?
Mhm. With regards to compliance, that always sort of falls on, the agency's shoulders, or it falls on my shoulders in the sense that, I would have to say to the podcaster, listen, you can't ask them about forward-looking statements, or, we can't, there's certain lines that we can't cross, when it's a public company. If the information is public, we can talk about it, but if not, you can't ask. So I usually there's a little bit of a disclaimer, but for the most part, a lot of these podcasters, they're already experts in either the industry or the sector that they're talking to people about. So, I'll give you an example. A lot of the podcasters that are interested in this recycling company, they themselves are analysts. They're bank analysts. They're investment bankers.
Mm,
So they're people that actually work in the industry, and so that's one of the wonderful things that I've really enjoyed about working with these podcasters is they're coming to the table, and their depth of knowledge about what you're doing often will surpass what
mm,
your understanding of the industry is. So when it comes to kind of compliance and regulation and that sort of thing, I've been very lucky, but also, I'm pretty cautious. I make sure that the matches are sound, and Podpitch makes that possible because you can fine tune, right? Sort of who you want to pitch to. there's a section in there where, you can say, you can use keywords. Obviously, it's not done by keywords, but you can definitely say if it has to be a sort of a highly regulated and you want a podcast where, people understand that you can't just sort of throw caution to the wind and discuss what's kind of going on behind the scenes. You can sort of stick to, banking, investment banking, or, SEC, or, you just use the words that would make sense to kind of keep you in sort of the safe zone, right?
Yeah, yeah, that makes complete sense. I'm
Yeah.
wondering how much time are you investing? If you could try to kind of walk us through or estimate, how much time it goes into finding some appearances for an individual client so that the agencies that are listening can understand, okay, that's less time than probably what I'm spending now, but that's a good assumption. Or if anyone's listening who just wants to do it for themselves, because that's like where my perspective is coming from. I want to start using Pod Pitch to get Agorapulse and myself more appearances.
Literally maybe 2 hours of an investment
Mm,
of time, of setup, getting all of your information, getting all of your research. You can enter up to something like 30 pages of content with regards to your bio or,
okay.
about the client. So, say for example, I have a client, he is a plastic surgeon, but he's also a scientist. And so he has, a ton of research behind
Mm,
his name that's really important. So I was able to upload all of that information into his bio. So setup, you know, like any platform, you sign up, you pay your fee. They ask you to do, which I love about them, they ask you to do sort of a little, you have to meet with somebody from Podpitch before they turn you loose into the platform. And I appreciate that because there's so many little like nuances about the platform that just
mm,
make your experience extraordinary. Once you know how to do those things, you're off to the races. So, don't say, "Oh, I use platforms all the time. I don't need to know." Oh, it's nice. There's just these little, like, things that you wanna know that just make your pitching extraordinary. So you upload your client's information or your own information. Then you just go through a couple of more, you choose your voice. So, for example, if your client has written a lot of work and they have a very specific way of, writing and talking, et cetera, you can upload that content so the AI can kind of shape the pitch when they send it out to sort of sound like either your agency or you. And then you pick some keywords that, really align and sort of sharpen the pitch, and then you turn the AI loose.
mm.
And then the AI will present you with, say, 20 podcasts, and it says, "Do you think this is a fit? Do you like these?" And it's almost, like, mind-blowing because the podcasts that it presents are so usually on the mark, so cool, and you're like, "Wow, okay, now we're cooking." And then you can sort of set, do you wanna pitch 5 podcasts a day? Do you wanna pitch 30 podcasts a day? So, here's where things can kinda get a little challenging unless you have, like, a Calendly or a way of booking your client. If you get a lot of emails back, they come directly into your inbox and you have to, respond to it in your inbox, and then you have to book your client on the podcast, and that's where I find things can just slow you up a little bit. So, pitching any longer, now it's the booking.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the process.
Yeah, and I've known my clients for quite a while. A lot of them have been with me for many years. So I can say to them, "You book yourself. You figure out how to do this
Yeah.
and you book yourself. I've done the introduction. Here's the podcast that wants you. Now you book. You book it and you manage that." Because I think that could be really, that's where I think agencies and people kind of get hung up, because if you have, let's say, 5 people, you're booking them all for podcasts and they're nailing and getting those podcasts, that's the issue. So what you can do now is you can include a Calendly link in your pitch. So you can say, "If you want to book this person or my client or me, here's my Calendly link." But then you're kind of missing maybe a potential conversation or a little bit of, like,
Yeah.
personalization. So I don't love that, but if you needed to do things kind of fast and furious, you can sort of possibly do it that way. But I enjoy, once Podpitch has sort of got me the podcast and the podcaster and they say, "Yes, I'm really interested in the client," I like to have a conversation with the podcaster and say, a little bit more personal,
Mm,
aspects about the client, and then I connect them, and then they go off and they do the podcast, and I'm usually kept in the loop. So, the podcast will record, and then they will put it out on their social channels or in various different ways, but then they'll send me all the information about when, where, how, why, what.
Mm,
Video, it just came out. And then I take that information and then I put it onto LinkedIn. I put it on the website. I send it out in newsletters for my clients. And I know everyone loves data, right? And I love data as well. So this one client I've been working with for probably almost 10 years, and we
mm,
have been trying to grow the newsletter signups for as long as I can remember. And we've done everything. We've done, LinkedIn, we've done Facebook, we've done Instagram, and we've done the paid, right? We've tried to pay to get the ads out there to get people to sign up for the newsletter. We've done webinars, we've done roadshows. We have done everything to grow this newsletter, and it's just stayed. It's maybe fluctuated 100 here, 100 there. We've done 3 months of podcasting. I would say my client's probably been on, let's say, 10 podcasts, and in 3 months, we've grown the email list by 1,000. And these
nice.
these are these are people that are interested in the story, they wanna stay on, they like what they heard, they trusted the podcast, and so that for me was enough. And then if I
Yeah.
went to Google Analytics, this company was just sort of coasting along at a certain level. Every time we're on a podcast, we jump up. I mean, the most we've jumped up is 3,000 visitors, but these are people that are interested in the story. We've been able to just get more eyeballs on the story, get people who have signed up to sort of have more consistent news from us. So that was a real telling data point for me, was the sign up for the newsletters, because I know how hard it is to get those signups. They don't
Yeah.
just come naturally, and I've tried everything. So that's my only concern, and this is a question I have for you, is if, once everyone gets on board with Pod Pitch and they're loving this AI, and, Mike, you start to get, your inbox is full of 20 emails that are probably from Pod Pitch. How are you going to deal with that? Like, I feel like maybe sharing this is maybe not so good, but I'm
Well, I think there's plenty of podcasts and there's plenty of potential guests
okay.
out there. So I don't see this as a concern that it might be oversaturated. But 2 points that you made that I want to underscore. The first is just simply understanding that every podcaster has their own onboarding process. And so folks who are using this service, who are just trying to get themselves or their clients on other podcasts, just be prepared to have to deal with that, because you're to your point, yeah, you might want the guest to book themselves, because every podcast host is going to have their own booking system or process, maybe no process. I've been through it all. I mean, you've been through mine. Now I use Calendly.
Yeah.
I send you to a Calendly link. You pick a date and time. I control that calendar, so I can specify what I am or am not available to do. And then it takes you to an onboarding form that you fill out. That's my process. I do that across 5 different podcasts because that's what works for me. But when I'm booking on other people's shows,
Mhm.
who knows? And I'm just be prepared for that. But
That
the
is true.
second one,
There's no streamline. I mean, people have streamlined their own process, but you're right.
yeah.
And people run their own show. Like, most people, their podcasts are something that they've started. It's their show. It's their rules.
Yeah, it's their rules and you have to follow them. So be
Yeah.
prepared for that. So for agency owners who are looking to get started with this, what would be your recommended first steps?
Well, I don't think I'm alone in being a little frustrated with, paying for, over processed video and webinars, and just things that just you shouldn't be paying so much for, and also getting sort of so little back. So trust me when I say, check out Pod Pitch, because if it takes you sort of 20 minutes to go through the video, or the whatever it is that Pod Pitch wants you to go through, it's well worth it, because I really feel that the cost benefit analysis, how much Pod Pitch costs versus what you're gonna get out of it, there's no comparison. So I sound a little bit like a fangirl, but I am, I think you know this too. I mean, I was like this about Agora Pulse. I was a bit of a fangirl for Agora Pulse. Maybe how many years has it been? 5 years? So, and Agora Pulse is still the foundation of my work at my agency, and my girls love it. So, yeah, so Pod Pitch and Agora Pulse, these are the backbones of my work, and then everything else in between is just, it's the human aspect, I suppose, that makes it successful.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Karen. Thank you for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun. I know folks are going to want to have more questions about not only Pod Pitch, but you and the work you're doing. So if they want to connect with you or reach out, where should they go?
Yes, please. Okay, so my email, I think my email is somewhere in here. Like email me. It's Kara@charlie.io. And Charlie is spelled CHARLE. It's sort of clever. I have a partner in LA, and we were sort of doing a play on Charlie's Angels with that, which was just sort of fun. And her name is Jade. So you can email us or you can email me. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. The rest of them, I'm just on sort of in a personal way, not for my business. So that's a little bit about me. That's how you can get a hold of me.
Terrific. Thank you. And thank you, all of you who've been listening. That's all the time we got for today, friends. But don't forget to find the Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition on Apple and drop us a review. I'd love to know what you think about the show and maybe what other topics you'd love for us to cover in future episodes. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, hosted by Mike Alton and powered by AgoraPulse, the #1 rated social media management solution, which you can learn more about at agorapulse.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and be sure to leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us.